So do you ever worry if your practice is going to make it, whether or not you're going to make enough money to pay yourself plus keep your practice running? I know a lot of people do. And today I'm going to be talking about that and just talking about sustaining your practice and some exciting stuff I've been learning about over this past week. Plus I've got a contest coming up and it's getting started this week. So listen in to the podcast today. It's going to be some exciting stuff. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. This is session number 42 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm your host, Gordon Brewer, and I'm so excited that you've joined me today. You know, this past week has been an interesting week for me in that I've had a lot of ahas and discovered some new things, and I'm just so excited to be able to share them with you this week on this podcast about sustaining your practice and being able to make it financially viable and helping you overcome some of the money worries that we have with our practice. But one of the things I wanted to tell you about first is that I'm doing a contest, and it's already started, depending on when you're listening to this. Now, I'm recording this the week before 4th of July, Independence Day here in the United States. And so we've got that coming up. And so I figured I'd do the contest because I figured a lot of people would be taking time off and maybe be listening to the podcast. So anyway, here's what the contest is that I've got a package of goodies and things that I'm giving away. And if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/contests, and that's contest with an S on the end of it, you can possibly win or register to win this package of things I'm giving away. And so here's what's in the package. So I've got two books. One is Michael Hyatt's Your Best Year Ever. And I'm a big fan of Michael Hyatt, and you'll probably, if you haven't checked him out, you can check him out online. The other book is one called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, and I'm going to tell you a little more about Mike Michalowicz here in a minute. The other thing that is part of the package is a tumbler, a Practice of Therapy tumbler that's got you can drink your coffee in it. It's just a little insulated tumbler that you will get with this, and put your coffee in, put your cold drink in, whatever beverage you choose. It's a pretty neat little tumbler that I give away to special people like you. And then the fourth thing that's part of this package is 30 minutes of free consulting with me. So go over to practiceoftherapy.com/contest and enter the contest. And the more you share the contest with others, the more entries you get. And you can actually enter the contest more than once. So you could go in every day if you wanted to, and that'll just increase your chances of winning. So again, check that out, practiceoftherapy.com/contests. So I mentioned the book Profit First, and here's the other big announcement that I have that I'm just so excited about, is that Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, is going to be a guest on the podcast later this summer. I started reading the book this past week, and I'm going to tell you more about that here in a little while, but started reading the book, and I thought, just on a whim, I'm going to get in touch with Mike's organization and see if he'd be on the podcast. And sure enough, I contacted his assistant and got a reply right away. And so Mike is going to be joining me in August for the Practice of Therapy podcast. And again, his book is Profit First. He's also got several other books out. One is what's it called? The Pumpkin... let's see. Let me look here. I'm looking in the book. Oh, The Pumpkin Plan and the Toilet Paper Entrepreneur and Surge. And I know the other thing is that Mike is coming out with another book that he's going to be talking about on the podcast when he's here later this summer. So anyway, check out the contest and maybe give yourself a chance to win the book, the books and the tumbler and 30 minutes of free consulting with yours truly. So thanks for joining me today. And let's jump into talking about making your practice sustainable and also financially viable. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned this past week just by reading Mike's book and just some other things that I've been thinking about. Have you ever had a situation where you've learned something or maybe heard something in a different way and it really just clicked for you? And maybe it was something you knew, or maybe it wasn't necessarily new information, but when you heard the information, it just really made all the connections for you in your brain or in your understanding of that particular thing. I think a lot of times we probably run into that in school when we have maybe a teacher that teaches us in one particular way and it's just not really all that exciting. And then you have another teacher that teaches you something and it's just kind of like, oh, that's what that means. And it'll just really click. So anyway, I guess my point is with this is that has been what it's been like for me this past week. In doing the practice of therapy and doing this podcast and just all that I'm doing with the Practice of Therapy website is I'm really trying to get out to people valuable information about running a private practice. And as you've heard from me before, I don't know it all. And I really kind of see this whole thing with the practice of therapy as kind of a parallel journey. But anyway, when I started reading the book, Profit First, it was one of those aha moments where things just really clicked for me. I really had a new understanding of what it meant to have a profit in your business and have a profit in your private practice. And it also got me just thinking about the money angst and the money anxiety that we can all have in our practices. So let me tell you a little story about a friend of mine. I have a friend that I've known for several years that is, I guess I would consider him a real estate investor. What he does is he buys property. There's a lot of stuff on TV we see about flip or flop, or where people are buying houses and they fix them up and then they resell them. My friend was doing things sort of like that. But the thing that really impressed me about his way of doing things is that he wasn't trying to do it on a large scale. As a matter of fact, he wasn't just making just tons of money with each sale. He was just making a little bit of money that he would then take and reinvest and just compound that money through his investing of real estate. So he would buy up, he particularly focused on tax disclosures and foreclosures, tax foreclosures and things like that, where people had not paid their property taxes. And so he would go in and buy the property from the state or from the county by just paying the tax bill. And a lot of times it wasn't that just a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 he'd pay the tax bill. And then he'd end up owning a piece of property that was maybe worth 3 times or 4 times that. And so he would just turn around and sell the property and make a profit on the property. But the thing that impressed me about kind of what he was doing is that he wasn't really trying to make this huge profit, but was really doing it a little bit at a time and doing it over a long period of time, and just really committed himself to the process of doing what he was doing in order to make money for himself. In the book Profit First, that was one of the things that really struck me about this profit first system that Mike Michalowicz has come up with, and that it's not so much about trying to make this huge amount of money with your practice or with your business, but really making it sustainable and making it profitable, because in the end, of course, you have to make a profit in order to stay in business. But the other thing about it is, as the title suggests, is that you take your profit first instead of letting your profit be what is left over after you pay your expenses. So let's think about this a little bit more, and let me delve into this a little bit and explain some of this to you. I think for most of us in this field, in the field of providing services for people, is that we didn't really get into it to try to become just super rich. I mean, most of us in this business or in this field do it because we've got the heart for it. In other words, we truly care about people. We really want to help people. But at the same time, we want to be able to maintain a standard of living that is comfortable. In other words, we don't necessarily want to live paycheck to paycheck and have a whole lot of angst around our money. I know that's true for me, and I've gone through periods in my life when that was true, where I had to worry about what I spent on supper, or what I had to worry about, how I was going to get to the next paycheck. And the truth of the matter is, and the sad reality is that the majority of at least Americans live that way. And I hear that story over and over again, and I'm sure you do too, from your clients, and that money and the anxiety around money is a huge stressor in their lives. So really, when you think about it, most of us just want to maintain a certain standard of living. We want to have a reliable car to drive. We like to be able to go out to eat when we want to go out to eat. We like to have a nice place to live. We like to have time off to spend with our families. We want to raise a family. We want to do all of those things that are really, when it comes down to it, just simple things. And having a huge amount of money in the bank would certainly be comfortable, but that's not what we're focused on. We're not focused on amassing millions and having extravagant things. I know for me, I drive a Kia. And so, that's all I need. That's all I want in life, is really just to have those comforts and those things that help me maintain a standard of living that is comfortable. We want to be able to send our kids to college. We want to do all of those things. So one of the things that I think is important to do is to make that mindset shift. We hear a lot from a lot of people, this whole go get 'em kind of mentality, or this go get out and hustle and knock it out of the park and rise to the top of the pack. But I think if we were all honest with ourselves, most of us anyway, that's not really what we want. We just want to be able to maintain a standard of living that is comfortable and that we don't have to worry a lot about money. What we really want is, as they refer to it, is financial freedom. So with the profit first system, the bell that went off in my head, or the aha moment for me, is that Mike Michalowicz has put together a system that allows us to do that, where I don't have to worry about going out there and just growing the business and just making it bigger just for the sake of bringing it in more income. What I do is take the income that I'm getting and I allocate it differently. I arrange my finances in a way that is going to make a profit for me, that I'm going to have a decent standard of living, have a decent pay, and it will grow from that. And so here's the concept behind profit first. Our general way of thinking about profit, as I mentioned, is that we have an income from our practice. People pay us for our services. And then after people pay us, we have expenses that are incurred from running the business. So we have our rent we have to pay. We have our phones and computers and all of the things that we need to maintain websites, all of those things in order to run the business. The problem is that as you grow, and then after we take out our expenses, then what is left over is the profit. So profit first turns that around a little bit. We have the profit first system is simply we have the income that we bring in from seeing clients or seeing for people paying us for our services. Then you take your profit and also pay yourself. And then after that, you pay for your expenses. And I think for a lot of us, when we think about it that way, we're worried, okay, I'm not going to have the money to cover my expenses. Well, with his system, what you're going to do on the front end is really understand your cash flow, really understand where your money is going and how you're allocating things. And the beauty of this system is it's not based on necessarily dollar amounts as much as it is percentages. Mike in his book, Profit First, talks about the starting place at being you're just going to take a 1% profit from your income. And for most of us, if we took 1% every month or every couple of weeks and put it aside, in a year's time, we'd have a pretty decent profit. The other thing is being able to pay ourselves rather than paying ourselves on what is left over, is paying ourselves on the front end of what is a fair salary. Then the expenses, going back to that whole Parkinson's principle, and it's not necessarily Parkinson's disease, but the Parkinson's principle says that when a person has money, they will spend the money. In other words, they will fill the space. It's kind of like if you've ever lived in a smaller house and you've gone and moved to a bigger house, it doesn't take long to fill that space. Well, we do the same thing with our money, and that's called the Parkinson's law. Not like like I mentioned, not like Parkinson's disease, but another guy by the name of Parkinson that came up with his law. He says that if you've got $5 in your pocket, you're probably going to spend it. So with the expense side of things, what we do is really try to reduce the space or reduce the size of the house and then fill that size house rather than having a lot of expenses and large expenses. So a big part of Profit First system is really looking at what your expenses are and really whittling those down to where you can have more income for yourself and also more profit for your company. So the other thing is the system is really just allocating in really just four areas. You have your income that you bring in from your practice, from your seeing clients. And it is true that you do need to have a certain level of income in order to maintain a certain salary and a certain amount of profit. But taking away that angst about trying to bring in more clients and building the business and getting more and more income, instead take the income you've got and allocate it differently. And that was really kind of the aha and just really kind of the whole premise behind Profit First is that you take the money that you're getting and you allocate it differently in order to have a profit. So I'm going to put a lot of this is in the show notes, and it's going to go, maybe the show notes will give you a better picture of this. And I would invite you really to take a look at Mike's book. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Mike's going to be on the podcast later this year. And so I'm really hoping that I'm going to make a list of questions. And if you have questions for Mike, if you'll send those to me as well, and that way I can ask those when I do the interview with Mike and listening to this. So that's basically it for the Profit First system. I know I've just kind of touched the surface, but to me, the bottom line is that you really have to think about your money differently and think about how you allocate your money and how you use your money differently. Well, I hope this has given you some food for thought around this Profit First system and this book that I discovered, and it's been a hidden gem for me. And I was just, you can probably tell that I'm pretty excited about just coming across this and being able to think about finances and money and all of that differently. As I mentioned, the bottom line, I think, is that all of us need to maintain a certain standard of living just to be happy. None of us wants to live paycheck to paycheck and just constantly worry about money. And I think the redeeming thing for me when I really started learning about this new way of thinking about money and how to manage my finances is that I don't have to focus and put a lot of pressure on myself to necessarily grow my business by having to bring in more and more clients or growing the business with a lot of big bang to it. I can really just take what I've got, which is comfortable, and just reallocate it and arrange it differently. And that was just a huge relief for me when I began to think about it that way. So that's going to be it for today, folks. Again, take a look at that giveaway that I'm doing, the contest that I'm doing. And again, the URL for that is just go to practiceoftherapy.com/contests. And again, that's contest with an S on the end of it. And you'll get a chance to win those two books, Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt, and then Profit First that I've been talking about today. And also the Tumblr, and then 30 minutes with me, and some free consulting with me by just taking part in that contest. It's just a little way for me to kind of give back to you all that listen and just make a little bit of fun out of it. I know a lot of us just enjoy winning things at times. And so take care, folks, and do have a safe 4th of July or Independence Day if you're listening to it during that time period. And let me hear from you and think about sending me questions you might have for Mike Michalowicz. And take a look at that book. It's really one that I think will be a game changer for you. Another one, too, that I'll mention just here before I close is if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, take a look at his stuff as well. He and Mike have very much the same philosophy about money and money management, and it's something that I've really thought a lot about in terms of getting my debt down and looking at how to remove ourselves from debt, because debt is a killer when it comes to finances, and so many people get in so deep. I know for a lot of us and a lot of you out there listening, you're out of graduate school and you're still paying those student loans. And Dave Ramsey talks about this idea of the snowball principle, where you pay down, essentially you start with your smallest debt and you pay it off quickly, and then you move on to your next highest debt. If you'll go to YouTube and and I'll try to remember to put this in the show notes, look at the Dave Ramsey Show and listen to some of his YouTube videos on debt and how to get yourself out of debt. So that's it, folks. Have a happy and safe 4th of July or Independence Day if you're listening to it before then. And if you're listening to it afterwards, I hope you have a great rest of your week or weekend. Take care, folks. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. If you haven't already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.